How's it going, guys? You may hear my fan in the background. So we're here to do our game review for Rust. Now, if you don't know what Rust is, basically think a adult version of Minecraft. It's a lot more ruthless, a lot more difficult, a lot more technical than you have to deal with, and it's a little more on the usage scale for a computer just to run the damn thing. So I've known about Rust since 2014 when I first got my first actual laptop for myself, and it was one of the games I tried running back in the day. And around that time, Rust needed like 4 gigabytes to run, and I could run it. Didn't really feel it too much because around that same time, I believe The Forest came out, so I was going back and forth between those two games, and pretty much just lingered on to my Steam library, never touched it, and then tried to recently get into it, only to realize that Rust updated itself all the way up to 16 gigabytes to run that goddamn game. And then, have my new gaming computer here, stuff like that, and then been playing Rust. So I have roughly about maybe almost 100 hours. Nothing comparisons to the bigger YouTubers. Some of my two famous YouTubers I like to watch when it comes to Rust, and I've learned a lot of stuff from them, is Willjum and SebiK, both European YouTubers. I learned a lot of almost everything I know about Rust. I've learned from watching their videos. And back in the day when I could actually run Rust, Rust is a big MMO. Random people, there's giant clans, there's giant zergs. If you are a solo in that game, you will get squished big time. People do not hold back against new people whatsoever. There'll be people who even camp the spawn zone when new players actually spawn in a certain map. I think like the max population a map can have is like 1,000 people. For me personally, I recommend anyone, if you think about getting into Rust, you want to try to get into Rust, either have friends who have thousands of hours into Rust and know what they're doing, or start with smaller servers and actually work your way to that. That's what I'm in right now. You can see the background of my base of the sun in the server that I'm in now. It's a smaller server, so it's made for noobs and stuff like that, or new people. And just like a couple days recently ago, we figured out how to set up an electrical system in your base, so I'm not sitting in the dark ages with candles and fireplaces and stuff like that. It kind of makes your brain hurt because it's on somewhat of the realistic side, but at the same time, it's still, has that game mechanics. But slowly over time, watching some YouTube videos and having people who help me out in there, shout out to them for their administrators and all that stuff like that, who are willing to help all new people, figuring out some of the electrical systems for myself. So it's not as difficult as I thought it was, but it's something that does take time to get used to. Because when you start out there, you start out naked, you start with no gear, no tools, you start out with a rock and a torch, and then you're pretty much good luck. For like spawn systems and stuff like that, you have sleeping bags, so there are certain plants in the game you can make to actually create cloth, which allows you to actually make sleeping bags, and that'll basically be your set spawn point. I believe there's like a 2 or 3 minute cooldown if you die and use that sleeping bag within that certain area. There are giant landmarks, you have missile silos, you have airports, you have domes, scientific areas, there's gas stations, stuff like that. So you're not allowed to build within like a certain distance of those things because it prevents people from actually camping them, taking them over, and stuff like that, and basically just being a broken player in the game. Now, depending on where you were, because it's broken into certain areas, it's basically just either one giant island or it's multiple islands, but either way, it's surrounded by water. You have the grassy, what would you call like a tundra terrain. You have the forest, you have the desert, and you have the Arctic biome. There are weather conditions in that place, so if you get too hot or you get too cold, you can actually die from the weather. You do have starvation and water, and of course you have your typical health, so you got to make sure you keep those up so you don't actually die in the game. Now, when it comes to the environment itself, this is where things have actually changed for me in Rust, because Rust only technically has 2 predators and 2 other species. Rust has bears, wolves, boars, and deer. I really wish they would actually update their animals, especially being based on the environment that you're actually in. But I think they just want to keep it as simple as possible. Rust has pretty much gotten this far with what they've added in the game. Uh, but since their recent update, they updated wolves. Now, back before the update, wolves were one of the most rarest animals you could actually find in the game. And if they see you, they will attack you. But it was almost like you have a greater chance to win the lottery than you did to come across a wolf in the goddamn game. And it was one singular wolf. If there was multiple ones of them, it was even more rare. With bears, you could easily tell that if there was a bear nearby, because there's brown bears and there's polar bears. But they would have these thunderous footsteps. So think about if you were living downstairs and someone had really heavy footsteps, you hear that thundering sound. That's how you could tell if there was a bear around. And bears, the AI is kind of interacted with the sounds, because if it hears you running around, it will sometimes chase you. Boars, on the other hand, they pretty much mind their own business. If they spot you within a certain distance, they will attack you. They can be somewhat of annoying. And then you have deer, which I'm just now seeing in the server. Deer, they pretend to actually be more rare than the other three animals are. But getting back to the wolves, and this has pretty much come up a big complaint for a lot of the Rust players, and even some for the newer Rust players. The company who made Rust, who decided to update the wolves, they updated the aggressiveness of wolves, and now there's wolf packs, which can consist of up to 3 or 4 wolves. This is where it pretty much screws over the new player even more, because as soon as you hear a wolf howl, they immediately spotted you, and you'll start hearing the little pitter patter of their footsteps, and there's no more of use fire to scare them away. Will not work. I already did it. It scares off one, but the other 2 will actually circle around you and attack you, going back and forth until eventually you will die. The AI in the game is very petty, because it will actually spawn camp your corpse for a certain amount of time before they actually leave within the vicinity. And this is starting to annoy Rust players. I've been getting annoyed by it myself too, because I've died by more times from wolves than any other thing in that goddamn server or in the game itself. I know there's sharks in the game too, but that's not until you get further out into the ocean where you start diving for stuff. There is actual AI robots in the game. There's 2 versions. There's scientists and there's tunnel rats. Scientists will stick more around the military zone areas like that. You can easily spot them because they're usually wearing a tealish blue hazmat suit. They will be packing Thompson's machine guns. Now, when you're playing your character, you start out, you have 100 health. There's nothing that's going to increase your health, nothing that has any health regeneration. You can heal yourself with band-aids or, medical EpiPens and stuff like that. That's about it. If you think you're going to start messing with the scientists, I highly recommend you do not, unless you're fully geared and there's multiple people if you decide to run a clan like that, because each one of them has 160 health, and they're not always by themselves. They can consist up to between a small group of 3 or 4, or if you do something like the military base where they consist up to 12 of them. Now do 12 times 160, and that's how much you're dealing with. Some of the best weapons in the game, I'm rocking right now the bolt action rifle, which does 80 damage. It's still 2 headshots to take those guys out, and it's really annoying, and they're extremely silent. You will not know they're there. The only way you will know a scientist is within that facility is they have little radio static. So someone's running a CB, how it has that police chat going on there. Well, they have kind of something similar to them. So if you hear that, then there are scientists nearby. The other AI robot is tunnel rats, and you can find them within the train yard area or the train tunnels. I learned that out the hard way, because out of all the YouTubers and the Rust videos I always watch, people bragging about, you got to go to the train tunnels. That's some of the best loot you can get in the game. However, what they don't tell you is that some of the best loot you can get in the game in the beginning of the game. Later on, train tunnels and the train yards are completely goddamn useless. If you're trying to get like early tech trash to make turrets, stuff like that, yes, you can go down there, you might be able to find some decent loot. Those guys, I believe, are packing like 125 health each. And once again, they're also silent. The only thing is they don't have that little radio signal thing, so you won't be able to tell they're there. And the AI is extremely good at spotting you. Like eagle sight, like you could be running around in the dark and they would see you. It's really annoying. I've died to the AI multiple times underestimating them. I've lost all sorts of weapons and it just threw me in a complete rage. From my experience of playing Rust, and actually from going to Minecraft to playing Rust, there's a big difference in the gameplay, game style, game look, stuff like that. I would say Rust is a little more lenient on how you can actually build your bases, but not by that much. You do need stuff that is something that's called a TC or a tool cupboard, which is basically the heart of your base. And whatever you build your base out of, you need to put that into your TC to keep it from not disintegrating or breaking down over time. So if you build your place out of wood or stone or metal, that's what you need to put in your TC. And you got to make sure you lock this stuff up too, because if people have access to your TC, they can actually take over your base. There's also things like people can actually raid you too. They'll use rockets or C4 or any form of explosive to break into your base and actually take your stuff. That's another thing that a lot of new people will struggle with, is actually, deciding how to build a base. You can't just build a base like a house and then expect not to be like raided, especially by bigger clans, or for them not to know where your TC is, because you have to specifically, put it somewhere where you're not gonna think that they're gonna find it. There's the night and day cycle. Nighttime you're gonna actually come across more wolves, so it's a lot more harder. You have your torch, you have forms of flashlights, there's miner helmets, there's night vision goggles. Night vision is one I highly recommend people actually get. It still has like that UV green light look, but it saves you a lot of trouble, because with using flashlights and torches and stuff like that, if people see you, especially even if you are a naked player with no armor, no gear like that, they will shoot you. I learned that from playing on bigger servers like that. Now, one of the best things to defend your base with, once you start into the electrical area of the trees, there's 3 workbenches. There's workbench 1, 2, and 3, and the further you get to the workbench, the more sophisticated stuff actually gets, and the more better gear and weapons and stuff like that you unlock. Turrets are going to be your best friend. Now, there's technically 3 types of turrets. You have flame turrets, which basically will use a form of oil, so it's like a flamethrower that just goes back and forth, and if it spots an enemy, it will just shoot out a flame at them. Then you have automatic turrets, which is where it has a CCT camera onto it, so it can tell the difference between an enemy and an ally. And you actually put your ammo and you put a specific gun in there, and it actually has a very long range. And I looked it up too. Those auto turrets have a range of like 2 football fields. So if you get close enough, they will, take out your enemies and stuff like that, and they eventually, can be destroyed over a certain amount of time, depending on what they're using, if they're using weapons or using explosives and stuff like that. What I've noticed from my experience in playing Rust, the smaller your bases, the less likely chance you have of getting raided. You think about building like these huge castles or huge, city-sized buildings, stuff like that, you have a higher chance of getting raided, because people know you're going to have a higher amount of loot content that they're going to want, especially if you live next to a clan or a Zerg. You'll see these massive foundations, these windmills and stuff like that are producing all this electricity, and all these auto turrets and CCT and these TC buildings all around. And I believe it's like between 6 and 8 blocks radius wise. You cannot build within that certain radius of that person's base. So there is some base protection, but it will not stop a rocket or something like that from actually coming in there and actually destroying your stuff, because they can still physically do that. They just can't build within that certain area. You used to have, like, when it comes to vehicles, there's like broken down vehicles all the map you can find. There's bicycles, there's dirt bikes, there's mini helicopters you can find if you get lucky enough. There's hot air balloons. The more the flying stuff is going to take a little more getting used to. I personally haven't experienced it yet. There's boats, and then there's like big events that happen too. There's like the cargo ship and the oil rigs, which can have some probably one of the best loots in the entire game. However, they are heavily guarded against with the scientists, and they usually tend to pack the best weapons in the game to prevent the player from actually getting that loot. And there are clan wars that will actually fight over oil rigs or the cargo ship just for that loot. Usually, depending what server you're playing on, some of them will do a full server wipe. So where once that day's up, everyone starts out from the beginning all over again. Some do it weekly, some do it monthly. I know Rust has even hosted like a few tournaments back in the day too. I almost never see it now. And I've been playing Rust on and off. It is very rage-inducing most of the time, especially if you lose a lot of your stuff because how petty the AI is. Because they will guard your stuff, especially with the scientists. There's eventually a cooldown, and they will eventually go back to doing what they're doing. But your body and loot do have a certain time period before it actually just fully disappears, and that's to clear up any clutter on the map, so the map doesn't lag and you hear a family background sneezing. So I do apologize. Same thing with animals, particularly more once again wolves. Will actually eat your corpse to regenerate their life if they took any damage, stick around for a bit, and then will wander off. The AI, like I said, is very petty. It will camp your body for a certain period of time, so it can make it extremely annoying, especially if you had some of your best gear on you and you happen to die by a player or an animal or one of the AIs, and you're having to rock a bow again, something like that. One of the things that I forgot to mention too is there is radiation poisoning too. There are certain areas that are actually radiated, and you can die from radiation poisoning unless you have a hazmat suit or some pills that actually help you with that. You can die from radiation too. There's fall damage in the game. One of the animals I also forgot to mention was the horse. You can actually find wild horses all over the map. You can actually ride them. You can actually suit them up. Depending on some servers, they may actually reset animals. So even if you do happen to have them in your base, they may get reset back into the wild. So make sure you take off any gear that's actually on them. I don't believe all servers do that, but at least the one I play on does. Now, there is farming in there. You can farm all sorts of like wild berries. You can farm hemp. You can farm pumpkins, corn, stuff like that. So you can start your own farm, but be wary because of new players or anyone else can raid your stuff, and we'll take that too. Now, when it comes to the more electrical side and the technological side of Rust, that's where like I said, you start getting more of the auto turrets, and there's drones and stuff like that. Like I said, it's somewhat based off of real life stuff. How to actually set up, a light, or how to set up an automatic door. So if you don't know nothing about electrical stuff, even in real life, I highly recommend you look it up on YouTube. There's several videos that get to the explanation. Hey, this is how you set it up. This is the stuff you need. It will take you some time, but trust me, it does help. Even my own base, I have like 3 turrets just to protect me. You don't want to be rocking the dark ages through your entire Rust experience and just say, I didn't have that much fun because I couldn't advance. Like I said, Rust is definitely one I highly recommend you actually have friends to play with. Make the games a lot easier. Of course, you do have to deal with random people who might say certain stuff. There are cheaters in Rust too. People with invincibility frames, spawning in ammo or flying, something like that. Report them to your administration. They'll ban them, something like that. So far, I haven't come across any people really too racy in the game. Thankfully, I do know that there are people like that, especially with some of the big YouTubers I've watched. They have to come across and deal with that crap. Yeah, there are certain items wise, like some of the best items in the game cannot be crafted at your workbench. They actually have to be found, which makes the hunt and the thrill for looking for these items even more difficult because you have to be on your awareness from other players and the wildlife who want your stuff. So far, I think it's the one. There's only one weapon in the entire game I want. I think it's an L19 sniper rifle. It's the best sniper rifle in the entire game, and I've yet to come across it. But I want it. That's my holy grail right there. Comes to clothing wise, there's your elements you have to deal with: radiation poisoning, explosive, physical, projection, and animals. Certain clothing will give you a certain amount of protection. What was it? It was most clothing you can craft. One thing I should mention in the game is the currency. There's actually in-game currency, and it's called scrap. You will normally get that from either items, or you'll get it from like breaking barrels and stuff like that. That's basically your currency to either make items in your workbenches or actually buy items from a place called the Outpost. And that's basically the heart of the server. That's where you can do all your trades. It pretty much has almost everything in the game except for items that cannot be crafted, usually. And it's like surrounded by like SAM turrets and automatic turrets and scientists, so that it's a non-PvP area. So if you attack people within that area, you will not only die from all the stuff that's protecting that area, it will actually put a bounty on you for I think it's like 15 or 20 minutes. So if you try to enter that area with the bounty, you will just be gunned down by the turrets. Now the other turret I forgot to mention is SAM sites. Another one of those things you have to find, cannot be crafted. There is a thing called a patrol helicopter. Basically, it patrols the entire map, or certain patrol helicopters within that certain radius will patrol the entire map. And if it spots you, it will attack you with either its guns or missiles. And I've seen plenty of people lose their bases thinking they're going to take this thing on, and their base just gets annihilated. But the thing is would I recommend Rust to players? Now, like I said, if you're used to builder games like Minecraft and The Forest, 7 Days to Die, something like that, where it's more difficult and less choice-wise on how to build, stick with those games. If you want something that's really going to test your limits, even as a new player, that you will rage on, you will lose all your stuff. You will have to build multiple bases. If you're fine with the server getting wiped weekly or monthly, depending on whatever server you are, dealing with random ass people who are trying to break into your stuff and stuff like that, then yes, I would recommend Rust. Rust will definitely challenge your limits of how well you can actually last in that game. The one thing that I can say is that me personally, I always choose places that are far more isolated instead of heavily populated. Because with heavily populated, you're going to deal with a lot more clans, you're going to deal with a lot more trolls, you're going to get raided a lot more. The only problem with choosing areas that are more isolated is the resources that you will need depending where you're going to build and how far that resources is. Like your wood, your stone, your metal, your sulfur. The more isolated area you choose, the harder the resources are going to be. Now, when it comes to that, the Arctic biome would be considered to be the hardest one. It tends to have more nodes, which is basically your metal, your sulfur, and your stone. Sulfur you will use for explosives and ammo. Your metal nodes you will use to basically upgrade your base. Your stone nodes to upgrade from wood. You'll get more nodes there. However, you'll be lacking in more forest area, and you'll have to deal with temperature. So you can actually freeze to death, especially if you go swimming in water, either bearskin or clothing. You will actually remain wet for a certain period of time, and you can actually freeze to death. I know, I found that out the hard way. If you choose the desert, on the other hand, you have like basically no forest whatsoever. You have cactus and palm trees. Once again, you have plenty of nodes, but you have to deal with the heat. But you will deal with more wolves and boars. You can use cactus to get cloth, but it's going to be a little more difficult. And if you choose areas like the tundra area, where it's like a little bit of mountain terrain, but mostly grass and green, that's where you can really gonna deal with more of your clans and your zergs, because it basically has your trees, it has your nodes, it has your wildlife, it has your berries and all plant form that you actually need to actually start your base. You're gonna have a harder time building within that area than you actually will anywhere else, just because you'll be getting raided by people than having to deal with environment animals. You can technically build like houseboats esque type of thing. There's a certain distance the foundation will actually go within the water before it actually becomes too deep, and you cannot build like that. It doesn't work like something like Subnautica, where you have like a deep amount of water and you can build this really tall structure and the legs just go down to the bottom of the foundation. Rust does not work like that. Rust is, like I said, it's more on the realistic side. So there's a certain distance you can go before that foundation will just not go any further. Water bases tend to be a little more difficult to raid, just strictly with the fact because with water, the deeper you go, the more you have to swim. But the higher chance you have of actually losing loot sinking to the bottom of the water. And you do need scuba gear to actually reach further depths in the water, or otherwise you will drown. And your character in that game cannot hold their breath whatsoever. Like with Subnautica, I think the starting thing is like 35 seconds. And Rust, it's like 4. So there's like a huge difference between holding your breath. I almost never see anybody building the water, just because of the difficult wise of having to actually deal with it. Occasionally, on a rarity, you may hear people riding around in their boats, and they may try to raid you, depending if your base is made completely of sheet metal. Most people will not even bother with it. The only ones you really have to worry about is clans and zergs. That's like 20 plus people. They're the ones who will be more determined to break into sheet metal bases, because that's where some of the best loot will be. But you're going to be wasting a lot more explosives, a lot more time. So otherwise, they will actually just focus on more bases that are made out of stone and wood, to try to grab what they can from the beginning and work themselves way up. But out of like maybe the 100 hours I put in Rust, I'm still playing Rust. I've died multiple times to the wildlife, to the scientists, but I'm still hanging in there, even through the amount of rage. I just want to, punch your screen in type of thing. But I can take breaks ever so often, like 30 minutes to an hour break, just to cool off, regather myself, and then jump back into the game. But yeah. So that's my game review / rant, I guess you want to put it. Like I said, I really hope they actually update the environments animal-wise in Rust. I highly doubt that they will, just because they want to keep it more simple. But if I was to actually say that some of the animals I would actually love to see them actually put into Rust, mountain lions or cougars would be definitely one I would love to see them put in there. Make it like a stealth animal, so where they make no sound until they actually attack you, because most mountain lions or cougars are like that. Even stuff like coyotes or jackals. They do have wolves, but in some of the environments just don't really make sense. Keep wolves in more like the Arctic forest area, and then add stuff like jackals or coyotes in more of the desert area. Snakes is another thing I would like to see them put in Rust, where they introduce. There is poison if you eat like raw meat, but I would love to see that from actual like poisonous creatures like snakes and stuff like that. Fish, another thing in there you can put in there. There's fishing nets you can put in there, but you don't actually typically see fish itself. Hell, they even throw whales in there. Spice it up a bit. Rust, come on now. I know you have the capabilities of doing that. One of the things that I'm pretty sure so far I've never seen in Rust is birds. No eagles, no falcons, no hawks, no form of bird whatsoever have I ever seen in Rust. That's another thing that needs to be put in that goddamn game. Because when the server's like dead, or there's like an empty server, and you just listen to that ambient quietness, all you're getting is the music. That's about it. You're not hearing any wildlife or anything like that. So there's a lot of animals And I'm pretty sure there are modded Rust servers and stuff like that that actually have that type of stuff. But when it comes to the actual game itself, this is the type of stuff I think that should actually be put into Rust. That's personally just me. You know, I may be single on that one, or I, may have multiple people who saying the same thing. But ranting on for like 30 minutes. The video gonna take forever to upload. But either way, I'm gonna get off. Stop rambling you guys' ear off. And like I said, that's my game review for Rust. But either way, stay safe, healthy, and sanitize. Make sure to like, subscribe, leave comments below, and continue to check out the rest of my videos. I'll see you guys.